The Georgian era can be viewed through two very different lenses, as a charming rural world of scientific progress, or as a rigid, high-stakes system built on exhausting manual labor. This story takes the second view. Imagine taking 10 modern celebrities and dropping them into the machinery of a Georgian farm in 1796. Strip away their fame, their wealth, and every advantage of the modern world. Suddenly, they are no longer celebrities. They are shepherds, dairymaids, and farmhands, standing at the very bottom of a strict social hierarchy. And they have just 8 hours to survive. Their workplace is a Georgian model farm, an aristocratic project designed to showcase wealth, scientific progress, and enlightened thinking. These farms were far more than simple agricultural businesses. They were carefully constructed stage sets, designed to present an idealized vision of rural life to wealthy landowners and their guests. The farm had to look perfect. The problem was that it was anything but perfect. The workers have only 8 hours to transform a functioning, filthy farm into a spotless rural showcase before the Viscount arrives for his inspection. The goal is not simply to produce food or maintain the animals. The goal is to create an illusion. The Georgian model farm operates like a tightly controlled machine rather than the peaceful countryside imagined by the aristocracy. At the center of this machine is the bailiff, Mr. Jones. His job is to turn the Viscount's abstract ambitions into physical labor. Every task must serve the same ultimate purpose. The farm must look flawless when its owner arrives. From the beginning, Mr. Jones makes the hierarchy clear. He gives the male workers strict, non-negotiable orders, and when the shepherds build a pen in the wrong location, he immediately orders them to tear it down and rebuild it. Because the inspection is the farm's true social and economic purpose. For the Viscount, this is not merely about producing food. It is a public performance of wealth, scientific knowledge, progressive thinking, and control over both nature and labor. As historian Dr. Cassie Newland explains, these model farms could function as fantasy environments, carefully arranged visions of rural order that stood in sharp contrast to the hardship, crop failures, and food insecurity experienced elsewhere during the period. A successful inspection gives the Viscount something far more valuable than a productive harvest. It gives him status. The farm becomes a propaganda engine, and the inspection becomes its broadcast. It is his opportunity to demonstrate to his peers that he has mastered the latest ideas in agricultural science. But beneath this polished image lies one of the great contradictions of the age. The farm proudly displays scientific progress. Yet that progress still depends heavily on human muscle. An on-site mill can process grain with remarkable mechanical efficiency, turning wheat into flour in a smooth and continuous operation. Greg and Charlie can oversee a system where the machinery does much of the repetitive work. But elsewhere on the same farm, workers are wrestling with sheep, hauling manure, cleaning animals, and performing exhausting physical tasks by hand. The farm may look modern. The labor behind it is anything but. This is the central contradiction of the Georgian model farm. Scientific innovation creates an image of efficiency and progress, while that image depends on workers performing some of the dirtiest and most physically demanding jobs imaginable. The polished Arcadian world, presented to the aristocracy, is built on an unpolished reality that the bailiff's entire management system is designed to hide. And as the 8-hour deadline approaches, that reality becomes increasingly brutal. Every task assigned to the time crashers exposes another side of the same system. Traditional agricultural techniques are pushed to their limits, not necessarily because they are the most practical methods, but because everything must be completed in time for the performance. The work is no longer simply about producing food, it is about sanitizing reality. A working farm is dirty, animals smell, manure accumulates, machinery breaks down, food goes wrong. But none of that can be allowed to appear in front of the Viscount. Everything must be cleaned, polished, decorated, and presented as if rural life itself were effortless. In the dairy, producing cheese and butter quickly becomes a lesson in just how much physical work sits behind the simplest foods. The first challenge is simply milking a goat without contaminating the bucket. Then comes the exhausting process of manually churning cream for hours. It is slow, repetitive, and physically demanding. Yet this work also connects to one of the most important medical observations of the era. People noticed that dairymaids who had been exposed to cowpox often appeared to have protection against the far deadlier smallpox. They also became associated with clear, unblemished skin. That observation would eventually contribute to the development of vaccination. The word itself comes from vacca, the Latin word for cow. So the dairymaid's work produced more than butter. It existed within the same rural world, where an observation about animals and disease would help change the history of medicine. The shepherds, meanwhile, face a much less pleasant challenge: dagging. The process involves removing filthy, contaminated wool from around a sheep's rear end. Georgians referred to this unpleasant material as bartleberries. The reason for doing it is far more serious than appearance. If the wool remains dirty, flies can lay their eggs in it, leading to fly strike, a horrific condition in which maggots hatch and begin feeding on the animal. Dagging is therefore an important part of animal husbandry. But under the pressure of the model farm, even this necessary procedure becomes part of the larger performance. The workers are forced to wrestle with struggling animals while racing against the clock, confronting filth and physical resistance simply to ensure that the sheep look presentable when the Viscount arrives. A necessary act of animal care has become another element in the farm's beautification routine. Then there are the larger animals, and these create an entirely different kind of problem. Getting a pig out of its sty is difficult enough. Trying to maneuver a 300-kilogram bull into position for cleaning is something else entirely. The workers need enormous physical strength just to control the animals, and every movement carries the risk of injury. Yet none of this effort is being spent on breeding, transportation, or any other essential agricultural purpose. The animals are being cleaned and groomed so that they can look impressive. They are being treated almost like aristocratic pets. The physical cost is enormous, but the Viscount cannot be allowed to see the struggle behind the finished picture. As his arrival draws closer, the entire purpose of the farm changes. Production gives way to presentation. The final stage is no longer about making the farm function. It is about making the farm look beautiful. The transformation becomes almost absurd. Influenced by the artificial pastoral tastes of European elites such as Marie Antoinette, the farm demands an extraordinary level of theatrical decoration. The animals are not simply cleaned, they are dressed for the performance. Ribbons are tied around the cows. Beeswax is used to polish the bull's horns. Perfume is applied to the sheep. Living animals are transformed into props in an aristocratic country play. Even the workers become part of the scenery. They are positioned almost like statues, holding the sheep in carefully arranged poses, with the animals' backsides facing the Viscount. The message is unmistakable. The animal's appearance matters more than the worker standing behind it. Every trace of the labor that created this illusion must disappear, and nowhere is that pressure more obvious than in the kitchen. The workers now have to produce food worthy of an aristocratic inspection, despite being unfamiliar with the technology and methods required. The oven becomes a problem. Bread comes out raw in the middle. Cakes made with fresh butter collapse into an unrecognizable mess. The food is failing, but the performance cannot fail, so the workers improvise. The ruined cake mixture is rescued and transformed into a pudding cooked over an open fire. It is not the food they intended to make, but it is something they can put on the table, and that is all that matters. Because the fundamental rule of the model farm is simple: the show must go on. The food must look plentiful, the farm must look prosperous, and the Viscount must never see how close everything came to failure. This contrast between appearance and reality is also reflected in the historical expression upper crust. Bread baked directly on the floor of an oven could develop an ash-covered or burnt underside, which would be cut away before the loaf was served to the wealthy. Those at the bottom of society, however, often had no such luxury. They ate the entire loaf. Even bread could reveal the hierarchy. The final inspection, therefore, becomes something very different from an assessment of agricultural success. It is a test of illusion. Can the farm create a convincing enough version of perfection to satisfy its owner? By the time the Viscount arrives, the answer appears to be yes. He sees perfumed sheep. He sees polished horns. He sees decorated cows. He sees a spotless yard where the evidence of daily farm life has been carefully removed. He sees a dessert that began as a culinary disaster but has been transformed into something presentable. What he does not see is the 8 hours of exhaustion required to create this image. He does not see the workers wrestling with animals. He does not see the manure being hauled away. He does not see the failed bread. He does not see the physical strain behind every polished detail. He sees the performance, and the performance succeeds. The workers earn Mr. Jones's approval by hiding the brutal reality of their labor behind a spotless facade. In that sense, the Georgian Model Farm was not simply a place where agriculture happened. It was a place where agriculture was performed. And yet, beneath all the theatrical presentation, something genuinely important was happening. The Georgian obsession with selective breeding, improved agricultural methods, and mechanized milling contributed to an agricultural revolution that would eventually transform farming efficiency and food production. The progress was real, but so was the labor that made it possible. The same system that celebrated scientific innovation could also demand exhausting physical work from people who had almost no control over the conditions in which they lived and worked. The aristocratic fantasy of the perfect countryside depended on hiding that reality. And perhaps that is the most revealing lesson of the Georgian Model Farm. Progress and exploitation could exist side by side. Scientific innovation could improve productivity, while the people operating the system continued to endure exhausting labor. And an image of rural perfection could be built by carefully concealing everything that made it possible. The Viscount did not come to see the farm as it truly was. He came to see the version of it that had been prepared for him, and for 8 hours the workers made that illusion real. History rarely gives us a simple story. The more closely we look, the more complicated it becomes. So keep questioning, keep looking closer, because history has a story to tell if we choose to listen.